At our family cookout, smoke burned my eyes as I watched my son's toys go up in flames. My brother smirked. He needs to toughen up. I grabbed my child and walked away. What I did next left them all rushing to me, desperate and begging. You know that feeling when you finally snap? Not with a scream or a punch, but with a cold, calculated calm that promises absolute destruction. For years, my family knew me as the quiet one. But when my own brother torched my son's most beloved toys, then dared to forge my name on a fraudulent document, I realized silence wasn't peace. It was betrayal. And that's when the quiet one finally decided to burn it all down. My name is Leo, and at 34, if you'd asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably say I was the quiet one. Not shy, not timid, just the one who never felt the need to turn every family dinner into a theatrical production. I grew up in a house where whoever shouted loudest usually won. For a long time, I actually thought being calm was my superpower. That was until last weekend when I learned that same calm could also make you an easy target. My parents, bless their hearts, love hosting these massive family barbecues. You know the type. 3 generations, barefoot kids screaming, and my mom convinced she needs to feed a small army. I usually go because my son, Finn, absolutely adores seeing his cousins. He's 5, curious, a little shy, and the kind of kid who carries his favorite action figures around like tiny, precious talismans. That morning, he packed them into his little backpack, proudly telling me they were going to watch him eat a hot dog. The moment we arrived, my older brother, Mark, was already holding court at the grill. Mark, the golden boy, always has been. Big personality, easy laugh, everyone's favorite growing up. If he broke something, it was a funny accident. If I broke it, I was careless. If he skipped school, he was testing boundaries. If I skipped, I was throwing my future away. You get the picture. Mark spotted us, grinned, and then his eyes flicked down to Finn. "Hey, little man," he boomed, crouching down. "Did you bring those baby toys again?" He pointed to Finn's backpack. Finn looked up at me, unsure if he was supposed to laugh. I put a reassuring hand on his shoulder, forcing a polite smile. "Yeah, he brings them everywhere," I said. Mark straightened up, a loud chuckle rumbling in his chest. "Gotta toughen this kid up before kindergarten eats him alive." The aunts and uncles around him tittered like he'd just delivered a harmless joke. I managed a strained smile, but felt a familiar twist in my gut. The rest of the afternoon blurred into grilled burgers, clinking bottles, and the usual casual jabs disguised as family banter. "Still stuck in that boring office job, Leo? When are you giving Finn a sibling? Remember when you were afraid of the lawnmower? I've trained myself to let most of it slide, but it was wearing me down." Then, just as the sun began to dip, casting long shadows, I heard it. Finn's cry. Not the tired, whiny kind, but the raw, panicked, heartbroken sound that makes every muscle in your body seize up. I sprinted towards the fire pit and froze. There, amidst the flickering flames, blackened and melting, were Finn's action figures, the very ones he'd been clutching all day. Finn stood there, hands outstretched, tears streaming down his face, as if his mind couldn't quite grasp the horror before him. And right next to him, grinning like this was all a big, hilarious joke, was Mark. "Relax," Mark said, holding up his hands, like I was overreacting. "Kids gotta learn the world isn't always nice. Better he cries here than at school." Something in me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch. I just scooped Finn up, grabbed our bag, and walked straight to my car. Not a single word escaped my lips. Behind me, I heard my mom calling my name, my dad muttering something about me being too sensitive, and Mark's mocking laughter. I drove home in a suffocating silence, Finn's little body hiccuping in the back seat, clutching the single toy that had been spared because it was in his pocket. When we finally got home, I knelt in front of him, gently wiped his face, and promised him we'd buy new toys tomorrow. He nodded, but his small frame was still shaking. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the scene replaying on an endless loop. The anger had settled into something heavier, colder. The next morning, as I was making Finn pancakes, a knock rattled the door. It was my dad. He didn't look angry, he looked worried. "Leo," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "I need to talk to you about Mark. It's serious." And that's when he told me something that made me put down the spatula, sit at the kitchen table, and truly listen for the first time in a very long time. Dad didn't waste any time. He came in, settled at the table like he owned the place, and folded his hands. "Look, Leo," he began, using that voice he always reserved for when he thought he was being supremely reasonable. "Mark's in a bit of trouble at work. Something about a client deal going south. His boss is talking suspension, maybe even firing him." He paused, looking at me expectantly. "And well, I know you have connections in that company." I blinked. "Wait, what? You used to work with their main supplier, right? You know people there. Maybe you could put in a good word. Explain that Mark's a good guy. Just impulsive." I stared at him. A part of me wanted to burst out laughing. Yesterday, my son's cherished toys were literally burned because my brother thought it was character building. And today, my dad was asking me to save Mark's job. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice flat. Dad frowned as if my tone was the problem. "Of course I'm serious, Leo. This is family. Mark's always been there for you." That line was so absurd, so divorced from reality. I nearly choked. "He's been there for me, Dad. He just burned Finn's toys yesterday. He made him cry for fun." Dad waved a dismissive hand. "You're still on that? Kids cry. You cried when your uncle threw your baseball glove on the roof, remember? You turned out fine. You can't shelter Finn from everything." I felt the anger clawing its way up my throat. This isn't about sheltering him. This is about basic respect. Mark crossed a line yesterday. Dad sighed like I was being incredibly difficult. "Leo, don't make this bigger than it is. You know how Mark is. He jokes. He pushes buttons. You've always been too sensitive about these things." There it was. The word. The one that had been thrown at me my entire life. Sensitive. As if caring about my kids' feelings was some kind of character flaw. "Dad," I said slowly, deliberately, "I'm not calling anyone for Mark. If he messed up at work, that's on him." His jaw tightened. "So, you'd let your brother lose everything over one mistake? Do you know what that would do to Mom? To this family?" I looked at him, and for a fleeting moment, I saw what he was really saying. "Do you know what that would do to our image?" "I think Mark did this to himself," I said quietly. Dad stood up, clearly done arguing. "You've always been stubborn, Leo. I'm telling you, if Mark goes down, this family goes down with him. Think about Finn. Think about what you're teaching him." And then he left. That entire day felt like a slow boil. I replayed that conversation over and over, and each time I thought about Mark smirking while Finn cried, my chest tightened with cold fury. In the afternoon, my phone started blowing up. First, it was Mom texting, "Leo, your dad says you won't help Mark. Can you please reconsider?" Then, Aunt Carol called, leaving a voicemail saying, "Leo, honey, you know Mark didn't mean it. Don't hold a grudge. Help him out." By evening, I even got a message from Mark himself. "Heard you're playing hero by refusing to make a call. Real nice, Leo. Don't forget who taught you how to ride a bike." I stared at my phone, dumbfounded by the sheer audacity. I didn't respond, but the messages kept coming. A group text from cousins asking why I was letting the family tear itself apart. A message from Mom that truly stung, even though I knew it was another manipulation tactic. "If you don't help, we're not sure we can have you over next time. It would be too awkward." The next day, I dropped Finn off at school and swung by the hardware store to replace his toys with something new and shiny. He lit up when I handed them to him that evening, but I could tell he was still hesitant, like he was scared they might disappear again. That broke something in me. A few nights later, Mom called. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. "Leo," she started, her voice steeped in that saccharine calm she used when she was about to lay on the guilt. "Your father and I are very disappointed. Mark has a family to feed. You know, he was just teasing Finn. It's time to let this go and be the bigger person." I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. Being the bigger person doesn't mean cleaning up Mark's messes every time he messes up. "Do you think you're perfect?" she snapped, dropping the act. "You've made mistakes too. We didn't let you fail when you messed up." "That's not true," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "When I failed, you let me figure it out alone. You told me it would build character. So why doesn't Mark ever have to build character?" There was a pregnant pause. Then Mom's voice turned cold. Because Mark is different. He's special. He has potential. He just needs a little help getting back on track. I couldn't even respond. I just said goodnight and hung up. By the end of the week, it felt like a coordinated campaign was being run against me. Family members I hadn't heard from in months were calling. My uncle sent me a long Facebook message about forgiveness. My sister-in-law, Sarah, texted me a picture of Mark looking stressed with the caption, "He's suffering enough." It wasn't just pressure anymore, it was coordinated pressure. And the more they tried to guilt me, the calmer I felt. It was a strange kind of calm, like the eye of a storm. Then on Friday night, I got an email. It was from David, someone I knew at Mark's company. Subject line, "You might want to see this." When I opened it, my jaw dropped. The email wasn't long, but it was enough to make my stomach twist. Attached was a PDF of an internal report, an investigation summary from Mark's company. The words blurred as I scrolled through the first few pages. Fraudulent expense reports, unauthorized client discounts, using company funds for team events that didn't exist. And then I saw it. My name. Apparently, Mark had listed me as a consultant on a fake invoice for special project analysis, which had been billed at several thousand. I had never done any consulting for them, never even spoken to Mark's company except in passing. Yet there it was, in black and white, my name on a fraudulent invoice he'd submitted. I sat back in my chair, feeling the kind of quiet anger that doesn't let you move right away. It wasn't just that Mark had used me to cover his tracks. It was that he had done it so casually, like my name was just another tool in his pocket. And all week long, my family had been begging me to protect him, not knowing he had already dragged me into this mess without asking. I called David immediately. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice low. "It's part of the HR investigation," he said. "I thought you should know because your name's on it. If this goes to court, or if they fire him with cause, your name might come up. I'd get ahead of this if I were you." After we hung up, I just sat there staring at the screen. The anger I had been holding back all week finally broke through. But it wasn't loud. It wasn't shouting. It was cold and precise. I printed the report and put it in a folder. Then I called Mom. She answered on the second ring. "Leo, please tell me you thought about what I said." "Mark's job." "Mom," I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to make her pause. "Did you know Mark put my name on fake invoices?" There was a beat of silence. "What are you talking about?" I explained calmly, each detail from the report. When I finished, there was a long, stunned pause. "You must be mistaken," she said finally. "Mark wouldn't do that." "I have the documents, Mom." Another pause. Then, "Well, I'm sure there's an explanation. He probably thought you wouldn't mind. You've always helped him out." That made me laugh. A short, bitter laugh that surprised even me. "Help him out, Mom? He committed fraud. He dragged me into it without my knowledge. And now, if this goes public, my name is tied to it, and you still want me to save him." "You can't ruin your brother's life over a misunderstanding," she said, but her voice had lost its confidence. "I'm not ruining his life. He did that himself." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory of Mark came flooding back. Every joke that went too far. Every time he gotten away with something while I was punished. Every time my parents covered for him. It was like watching my whole childhood play on repeat, except now it had escalated from broken toys to forged documents. The next morning, I woke up to a new text from Mark. "You've made your point. Call your buddy and fix this before it's too late." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just an order like I was his assistant. I didn't respond. By noon, Dad showed up again. This time, he didn't even knock, just walked in like it was his house. Finn was playing quietly in the living room, and Dad glanced at him before turning to me. "Leo, this has gone on long enough," he said, his voice low and stern. "Mark says you're refusing to cooperate. Do you want him arrested? Do you want to see your own brother in court? Did he tell you he used my name on fake invoices?" I asked. Dad's expression didn't even flicker. "Yes, and he said he would fix it if you just made a call." "Fix it? He committed fraud, Dad, and you want me to clean it up for him." "He's family," Dad said, like that explained everything. "You don't turn your back on family." I stared at him, but he turned his back on me, on Finn, on all of us. "And you keep protecting him." For a moment, Dad just looked at me, his jaw tight. Then he said, "If you do this for him, Leo, I promise you we'll make it right. Mark will apologize. We'll put this behind us." I shook my head. "No, not this time." Dad's face hardened. "Then don't come crying to us when you're on your own. You're making a mistake you can't take back." He left without saying goodbye to Finn. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the report spread out in front of me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I felt betrayed. Betrayed by Mark for dragging me into this. Betrayed by my parents for defending him no matter what. Betrayed by a family that only seemed to remember I existed when they needed something from me. Finn padded into the kitchen in his pajamas and climbed onto my lap. "Daddy," he asked softly, "are you mad?" I hugged him tight. "Not at you, buddy." He looked at the papers on the table. "Are those the bad man's papers?" I froze. "What bad man?" "The one who burned my toys." Something inside me settled then, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just about Mark anymore. It was about what Finn was learning by watching me. I folded the report and put it away. The next morning, I made a call, not to save Mark, but to set up a meeting with my lawyer friend, Maya, who could make sure my name was cleared completely. If Mark wanted me involved, then I was going to be involved on my terms. And that's when the plan started forming in my head. When you hit rock bottom, it doesn't always happen with a bang. Sometimes it's just a slow, heavy sinking until you realize you can't go any lower. That week felt like quicksand. The morning after I made the call to clear my name, I woke up to a family group chat explosion. Over 20 messages, overnight screenshots from cousins, side comments, even a few guilt-ridden voice notes from my mom. "Leo, we need to talk about this before it's too late. Your father is furious. Mark is losing sleep over this. Are you really okay with your own brother being humiliated?" There were even a few thinly veiled threats. "You're making it very hard for this family to trust you. If this gets out, the neighbors will never look at us the same way." I muted the chat and went about my morning. Finn was sitting at the kitchen table, swinging his legs as he ate cereal. He looked up at me with that quiet, watchful look kids get when they know something's wrong but don't know how to ask. "Can we go to the park after school?" he asked carefully. "Of course," I said. When I dropped him off, Aunt Carol was standing near the entrance with her grandson. She spotted me immediately and beamed over. "Leo," she said, putting on that smile that isn't really a smile. "We're all very worried about you. Mark is family. We forgive you for overreacting, but it's time to come back to the table. You're hurting everyone by holding this grudge." I just nodded and said, "Have a nice day," before walking back to my car. But inside, I felt like screaming. That evening, I got another knock on the door. This time it was my sister-in-law, Sarah, Mark's wife. She didn't wait to be invited in. "Leo," she said, setting her purse down on the counter like she owned the place. "I'm here as a peacemaker. You need to think about the bigger picture. Mark could lose his job. Do you know what that would do to our mortgage? Our kids?" I took a deep breath. "Do you know what it would do to me if I let him keep using my name to cover his fraud? He's not just risking his job. He's risking my future." She crossed her arms. "You always make everything about you. You're punishing Mark for being the favorite growing up. And now you're using this as an excuse to get even. That's petty, Leo. Really petty." Something about that word made me go quiet. Petty. If standing up for myself was petty, then maybe petty wasn't so bad. "Sarah," I said slowly, "if Mark wants my help, he can apologize to me, to Finn, and he can fix what he did with those invoices. Until then, there's nothing to talk about." She huffed, grabbed her purse, and muttered, "You're tearing this family apart," as she stormed out. After the door closed, I just stood there in the kitchen, staring at the grain of the countertop. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left the shell standing there. That night, I put Finn to bed early and sat on the couch in the dark. No TV, no music, just the hum of the fridge and the occasional car passing by outside. I thought about every time I had stayed quiet in the past to keep the peace. Every time I had told myself it wasn't worth the fight. And where had that gotten me? My name on fraudulent paperwork, my kids' toys in a fire, and my entire family acting like I was the villain for not fixing someone else's mess. Around midnight, I got a call from Dad. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, a text came through. "If you go through with this, Leo, don't bother coming to Christmas." I I stared at the screen for a long time before setting the phone face down on the table. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't care if I wasn't invited. The next few days were quiet, but not in a peaceful way. More like the silence right before a storm hits. The group chat eventually went from begging to passive-aggressive memes and quotes about family unity. I stayed out of it completely. Instead, I started planning. I called my lawyer friend Maya to ask what steps I needed to take to protect myself legally. I gathered every document with my name on it, scanned and saved them. I wrote down dates, times, conversations, anything that might be relevant later. I also started thinking about distance, not just emotional, but physical. If this was the level of manipulation I could expect any time Mark messed up, maybe it was time to put some space between us. I began quietly looking at job postings in another city, even a few out of state. It wasn't a decision yet, but the idea felt strangely freeing. One evening, while I was sorting papers, Finn climbed onto the chair beside me. "Daddy," he asked, holding up a drawing. It was him and me holding hands with a big sun over our heads. In the corner, there was a scribble of fire with a sad face next to it. "That's us," he said proudly. "And that's the fire. But see, we're okay." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, buddy, we're okay." After I tucked him in, I sat back down at the table and looked at the pile of documents. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. Rock bottom wasn't just a low point. It was a foundation, something solid I could push off from. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get more tense, Mom called again. Her voice was quiet, strained. "Leo," she said, "your brother might get fired tomorrow. If you have any compassion left, now is the time to use it. Once this happens, there's no going back." I didn't answer right away, because she was right. There would be no going back. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. "Then maybe it's time to stop going back." She gasped softly, as if I had just said something unforgivable. "You'll regret this," she whispered. And then she hung up. I sat there in the dark, phone still in my hand, and felt something shift inside me. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of being left out, not of disappointing them, not of the storm that was about to hit. If Mark was about to face the consequences of his actions, then maybe, just maybe, it was time for everyone to see what happens when I stop playing the quiet one. It's strange how quickly life can start to feel lighter once you make a decision, even a quiet one. The morning after Mom's call, I woke up before my alarm and felt steady. Not happy, not exactly, but grounded. I got Finn ready for school, made him his favorite pancakes, and we laughed together over how much syrup he could get away with before it counted as soup instead of breakfast. 4. The first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was just reacting to everyone else's drama. That same morning, I got an email from Maya, my lawyer friend. She had reviewed the documents I sent her and assured me my name was clear, as long as I formally notified Mark's company that I had no involvement in the invoices. She even drafted the letter for me to sign. I read it over twice, my hand steady, and sent it off. That was the first real move I made for myself. A day later, I got a short reply from the company thanking me for clarifying and confirming I wouldn't be implicated in their investigation. It was like a weight lifted off my chest. I hadn't realized how much I was bracing for impact until that moment. With that taken care of, I focused on Finn and on myself. I started running again in the mornings after dropping him off at school. Just a short jog around the block, but it felt good. I dusted off some old projects I'd shelved years ago, like the woodworking kit I bought and never touched. On the weekends, Finn and I started going to the park, the library, even little day trips to the zoo. Every time we did something just for us, I felt that hollow space in me filling up. Meanwhile, the family group chat grew quieter. Maybe they had finally realized their guilt trips weren't working. Or maybe they were waiting for me to come crawling back. Then about a week later, I got a call from Mark's company. Not HR this time, but Miss Chun, the head of operations. She wanted to thank me personally for cooperating and for clearing things up. She even mentioned that she'd been impressed by the professionalism of my letter and asked if I was looking for consulting work. I almost laughed. "Not officially," I said, but we ended up talking for nearly half an hour about my old job, my experience, and how I'd handled difficult situations in the past. By the end of the call, she asked if I'd be open to coming in for a meeting to discuss some short-term projects they needed help with. I hung up, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Excited. A few days later, I went to their office. The meeting went well. Better than well, actually. They offered me a contract position with flexible hours and a rate that was higher than I'd ever earned before. I signed it that afternoon. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just surviving this mess. I was coming out stronger. The shift in energy must have been noticeable because even Finn seemed lighter. He'd been quieter since the barbecue, but now he was back to chattering about dinosaurs and superheroes. He even started bringing his new toys to the park again, proudly showing them to other kids. Then the calls from my parents started up again, but this time they sounded different. "Leo," Mom said one evening, "your father and I are worried. Mark's been really down since the hearing at work. They haven't fired him yet, but they put him on unpaid leave. We're trying to keep his spirits up." I listened, nodding, even though she couldn't see me. "I hope he learned something from this," I said simply. There was a pause. "You're not going to help him, are you?" "No," I said, calm as ever. She sighed. "I thought so." But instead of sounding angry, she just sounded tired. I hung up and sat back, thinking about how different I felt. A month ago, a call like that would have sent me spiraling, second-guessing myself, wondering if I was being too harsh. Now I just felt sure. The next big shift came on a random Thursday afternoon. I was at the park with Finn when I got a call from Mr. Henderson, one of Mark's old clients, someone I'd known professionally for years. "Leo," he said, "I heard you might be doing consulting now. We're looking for someone to handle a big contract review. You came to mind immediately." We met the next day, and by the end of the meeting, I had secured my second client. Just like that, I wasn't just busier than I'd been in years, but on my own terms. And the best part, every success I had was mine. Not because of Mark, not because of my parents, just me. I started to notice how the family dynamic was shifting. A cousin messaged me privately to say he thought I was doing the right thing, that Mark had gotten away with too much for too long. An aunt quietly liked one of my posts about my new work. The silence in the group chat wasn't just disapproval anymore. It was curiosity. By the second month of my contract, I had built enough income to start seriously considering moving. I began looking at houses in a quieter neighborhood where Finn could have a yard to play in without me worrying about family dropping by. One evening, after a long but satisfying day of work, I was sitting on the porch watching Finn chase fireflies when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark. "Congrats on your new gig. Must be nice to profit off my misery." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "No, Mark, it's nice to profit off my own work." Then I set the phone down and went back to watching Finn laugh under the fading sky. It was in that moment that I realized the balance had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. I wasn't just reacting. I was choosing what happened next. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop simply protecting myself and start holding Mark accountable in a way that would make sure he never dragged me or Finn through something like this again. Because rising wasn't enough anymore. It was time to make sure no one ever tried to bury me again. Momentum has a way of building on itself. Once I stopped trying to please everyone, opportunities started opening like doors in a hallway I hadn't realized I was standing in. The consulting contract with Mark's company led to another project, and then another. Within a few weeks, I was invited to sit in on their quarterly review as an independent advisor. Walking into that meeting felt surreal. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I was a professional voice in the room, someone they were paying to listen to. And as fate would have it, Mark's department was one of the key topics on the agenda. I sat quietly as Miss Chun, the head of HR, laid out their findings: multiple policy violations, falsified documents, client complaints, and misuse of company funds. The leadership team discussed next steps, which included termination pending legal review. Then someone asked if they should bring in outside counsel, since one of the fraudulent invoices included a third-party name. Mine. Miss Chun turned to me. "Leo already cleared this up," she said. "We have a statement on file, and it's airtight. He's not involved. If anything, he's been helpful in making sure we understand the scope of what happened." Everyone nodded. In that moment, I realized two things. One, I was fully in the clear, and two, I was sitting in a position where I could influence what happened next. Not by lying or manipulating, but simply by telling the truth clearly, calmly, and in front of the right people. After the meeting, Miss Chun pulled me aside. "Off the record," she said. "Mark is lucky this isn't a criminal referral yet. If you hadn't clarified your position, we'd have had to escalate it to legal authorities. You saved yourself a massive headache." I nodded, feeling the weight of what could have been. "What happens now?" "We'll finish the internal process and likely cut ties. If he's smart, he'll resign before that happens." That night, as I sat on the porch watching Finn play, I realized I was holding a kind of power I'd never had before. Not over Mark's life exactly, but over how this story was going to end. A week later, I got another message from Mark. This one longer than the last. "You've really done it this time. They're about to fire me. If you had just made one phone call, none of this would have happened. Do you get some kind of sick satisfaction out of watching me lose everything?" I didn't respond right away. Instead, I went back inside, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not to Mark, to myself. I wrote down every incident I could remember of Mark's behavior over the years. The times he humiliated me at family gatherings. The times he made me take the blame for things he did. The countless jokes at my expense. The years of my parents excusing him while holding me to a higher standard. It wasn't for revenge yet. Not exactly. It was so I could see the whole picture. When I finished, I sat back and read through the pages. For the first time, I didn't feel like the quiet, overlooked kid anymore. I felt like someone who had been keeping receipts his entire life and now finally had a reason to use them. Then something unexpected happened. One of my cousins, the same one who had messaged me privately weeks ago, sent me a link. It was to a local business forum where Mark's name had been mentioned. He had been trying to start a side business on the sly using family connections to get investors, but the thread was full of comments from people saying they'd been burned by him, that he had taken deposits and never delivered. I scrolled through the posts, each one a little worse than the last. Angry customers, former partners, even an employee or two who claimed he still owed them money. This was bigger than I realized. I called my cousin. "Where did you get this?" "Heard about it through a friend," he said. "Figured you'd want to know. Looks like Mark's been in deeper trouble than anyone's admitting." After we hung up, I sat back in my chair thinking, this wasn't just a family problem anymore. Mark was burning bridges everywhere, and eventually someone was going to hold him accountable. Maybe in a way none of U.S. could protect him from. I spent the next few days quietly gathering information. Not in a vindictive way, but in a methodical, careful way. Screenshots of posts, copies of public complaints, records of the fraudulent invoices. I even started talking to a financial advisor about setting up a trust for Finn, one that no one in my family could touch or interfere with. If I was going to cut ties, I wanted to make sure my son would always be secure, no matter what drama erupted later. Then the moment that truly shifted everything happened. I got a call from Mr. Davies, one of Mark's old clients. Not the one who had offered me work, but another one I barely knew. They asked if I'd be willing to take over a contract Mark had mishandled. "We'd rather work with you," they said bluntly. "You have a reputation for being steady. We can't afford more chaos." I accepted. And just like that, I wasn't just surviving the storm. I was benefiting from it. Mark's downfall was directly creating opportunities for me. That weekend, I took Finn to a small fair just outside of town. We rode the Ferris wheel, ate cotton candy, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. On the way home, my phone buzzed. A new message from Dad. "Mark is coming by tomorrow. We need to talk as a family. Be here at 5. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I smiled, because now for the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking into an ambush. I felt like I was walking into an opportunity. I showed up at my parents' house 5 minutes early, just to watch them squirm. The driveway was already full. Dad's truck, Mom's SUV, Mark's car parked at an angle like he owned the place. Finn was with a sitter for the evening. This wasn't a night for him to be here. When I walked in, the smell of roast beef filled the house like they were trying to make the evening feel normal. Mom met me in the hallway, wringing her hands. "Leo," she said in a hushed tone. "Thank you for coming. Let's keep things civil tonight." I nodded once. "That's up to Mark." She didn't like that answer, but didn't argue. When I stepped into the dining room, Mark was already seated at the head of the table like a king holding court. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, hair a little messier than usual, but there was still that arrogance set to his jaw. "Leo," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Glad you could make it." I didn't sit right away. Instead, I placed a manila folder on the table in front of me and stayed standing. "What's that?" Dad asked, frowning. "Documentation," I said simply. "Before we talk about anything, I want to be very clear about where I stand." Mark smirked, like this was all a performance for my benefit. "Go on, little brother. Let's hear it." I opened the folder and slid the first document across the table. A copy of the signed letter I'd sent to his company, clearing my name. "First," I said, "I'm officially no longer associated with your investigation at work. They have my statement on file, and they know I had no part in what you did." Mark's smirk faltered. "Second," I pulled out a stack of printed complaints from the business forum and laid them down one by one. "I know about your side business. I know about the money you took, the people you left hanging. These are all public posts, Mark. If you try to drag my name through the mud again, I won't have to say a word. I'll just let your customers do it for me." He leaned forward, face darkening. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said calmly, meeting his gaze. "I'm promising you that I won't let you take me down with you ever again." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the quiet clinking of Mom nervously rearranging silverware. Dad cleared his throat. "Leo, this isn't necessary." "It is." I cut in. My voice was steady, not loud, but it stopped him cold. "For years I've watched you all excuse Mark's behavior. I've let it slide when he humiliated me, when he sabotaged me, when he hurt Finn. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. That ends tonight." I reached into the folder one last time and pulled out a copy of the trust paperwork I'd had drafted for Finn. "This is for my son. His future is now legally separate from this family. No one here has access to his education fund. No one can claim it or borrow against it. We are done being collateral damage for Mark's mistakes." Mom's face crumpled, but she didn't speak. Mark finally pushed back his chair and stood. "So what? You're just cutting ties, acting like you're better than us." I took a deep breath. "No, Mark. I'm acting like someone who's done being your safety net. If you want to fix things with me, with this family, you start by fixing what you broke. Your job, your business, your integrity. Until then, don't call me, don't text me, don't involve me." For the first time all evening, Mark didn't have a comeback. I gathered the documents back into the folder, tucked them under my arm, and turned to leave. But just as I reached the doorway, I paused and looked back at him. "You burned Finn's toys to toughen him up," I said quietly. "Congratulations, Mark. You did the same thing to me. And now you get to see what happens when I stop playing nice." Then I walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. The cool night air hit me as I stepped outside, and I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door, but I knew they'd be sitting in that dining room for a long time, staring at each other, wondering when or if I'd ever come back. And maybe that was the best revenge of all. Not vengeance, but freedom. But as I drove home, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Mr. Henderson, one of Mark's former clients, the one who had first warned me about the invoices. "We just heard Mark is trying to start over somewhere else," the message read. "Do you want to know where?" I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the reply button, because maybe I wasn't finished just yet. I didn't reply to that message right away. I sat on it for a night, turning it over in my mind. Part of me felt like I'd already said everything that needed saying. I'd drawn the line, reclaimed my name, and walked away. But the other part, the part that had watched Finn cry at that barbecue, the part that had spent years biting my tongue, knew this wasn't just about me anymore. The next morning, I sent a simple reply. "Yes, tell me where." What I got back made my eyebrows go up. Mark hadn't just tried to start over. He had applied for a job at another company in the same industry, one that handled sensitive client accounts. And according to my contact, he had conveniently left out his suspension and ongoing investigation on the application. I didn't need revenge for revenge's sake. But if someone else was about to put their trust and their money in Mark's hands, they deserved to know what they were signing up for. So, I gathered everything, the report clearing my name, the public complaints, the documentation I had. I sent a calm, factual email to Mr. Thompson, the hiring manager at that company. No emotional language, no character assassination, just verifiable information that their candidate had an unresolved history of misconduct with a direct financial impact. I didn't expect a reply, but a week later, one landed in my inbox. Mr. Daniels, thank you for bringing this to our attention. After reviewing the information, we have rescinded Mr. Mark Daniels' job offer. Please be assured that your identity will remain confidential. I sat back and exhaled slowly. That same afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mark. What did you do? His voice was tight, almost panicked. I told the truth, I said calmly. You just cost me my chance to start over. No, I corrected. You cost yourself that chance. I just made sure no one else got blindsided the way I did. He was quiet for a long time, and for once I didn't feel the need to fill the silence for him. You think you won, he finally spat. No, I said. I think I stopped losing. And then I hung up. After that, the family calls slowed to a trickle. At first, they tried one last round of guilt tripping. You've gone too far this time. Mark's at his lowest point. But when they realized I wasn't biting, the silence settled in like dust after a storm. 2 weeks later, I got another call from Miss Chun, the head of operations at Mark's old company. Leo, she said. I thought you'd want to know. We concluded the investigation. Mark has been officially terminated for cause. We're also pursuing recovery of funds through legal channels. Thank you for telling me, I said. There's one more thing, she added. If you're open to it, we'd like to extend your contract, possibly turn it into a permanent consulting arrangement. You've been instrumental in helping us clean this up. I accepted. That weekend, I took Finn to the park again. He was running ahead of me, holding his favorite toy, laughing as the late afternoon sun turned the grass gold. Watching him, I realized that the house felt quieter lately, but not in the heavy, suffocating way it had before. This was a good quiet, a clean quiet. A few days later, I got a text from Mom. Your father and I are sorry for how things turned out. We miss you and Finn. We'd like to start over when you're ready. I didn't respond immediately. I sat with it for a while, letting the weight of those words settle. Maybe someday there would be a way to reconnect, but it would be on my terms, not theirs. For now, I was content. A month later, I closed on a new house, a little place with a yard where Finn could play without looking over his shoulder. The night we moved in, we sat on the porch eating pizza out of the box, watching the stars. Daddy, Finn asked, licking tomato sauce off his fingers. Are we happy now? I looked at him, at the house, at the life we were building. Yeah, buddy, I said softly. We are. That night, as I locked up the house and turned out the porch light, I realized something. Mark had thought burning Finn's toys would make him tougher. It did, just not in the way he expected. Because I wasn't the quiet one anymore. What would you have done if your family had pushed you this far? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand with someone you love? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.